going to record. There we go.
Over your family.
Start over. Okay.
It just comes and goes.
Last week we finished our study of the woman at the well in John chapter 4. Just in review, after Jesus revealed to the woman that he was the Messiah, the woman ran into town to tell everybody that she had found the Messiah. And many people came back to the well to meet Jesus. And then they urged him to spend time with them. And he spent 2 days with them. And then they told the woman, we wanted to believe when you told us about it, but now we believe on our own because we've seen him ourselves with our own eyes. And that happened. These Samaritans believed in Jesus without Jesus doing any miracles. And I believe, now I don't know if this is true or not, but I believe that Jesus sowed seeds of belief there, and that after Pentecost, when Philip went to Samaria, thousands were saved. And I believe that these people had been, Jesus himself prepared them to hear the gospel and be saved. Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not.
I think it is.
But I feel like it might be. Okay. Today we're going to finish our study in John chapter 4 with the healing of the official son. And we're going to start by reading. Gary, could you read?
I got more buzz than.
Gary, could you read John 4:43 to 46?
Absolutely. After the 2 days, he departed for Galilee, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his own hometown. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, having seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the feast, for they too had gone to the feast. So he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had made the water wine.
Okay, so John chapter 1 introduced Jesus to us. And in those beginning verses, John showed Jesus to be God. And his whole purpose throughout, one of his purposes throughout the book of John is to convince us that Jesus is God. It's one of his purposes. Another theme from John chapter 1 was Jesus' rejection by his own people. And this theme continues throughout the book. We'll see as we study the story of the healing of the official son that Jesus was not well accepted by the people, even in his own neighborhood.
Especially his own neighborhood.
Yeah. Verse 44 explains that Jesus did not receive the honor he deserved in his own hometown, which was, what was his hometown? Nazareth, which was a town, one of the villages in Galilee. So Jesus didn't make Nazareth his home base when he was in Galilee. Capernaum was his home base in Galilee.
Right.
Because Jesus wasn't accepted in Nazareth. Well, they knew Jesus as the carpenter. So he'd lived 30 years in Nazareth, and he had learned to be a carpenter. He was an apprentice to his dad, who was the carpenter in town. And when his dad died, Jesus just took over the business and supported the family being a carpenter until he became 30 years old, which was at that time in their culture, that was the age of going out on your own or whatever. And they had a hard time seeing Jesus as anything else but the carpenter. But he was welcomed by many of the other Galileans. But it was clear from what John just told us that Jesus was not really, they listened to him, they liked the miracles he was doing, but they really didn't believe that he was the Messiah. Now, also in these verses, John gave us some time and location data. It's kind of embedded in the words that he gave us. First of all, he told us we are told that Jesus stayed in Samaria for 2 days, so that's a time thing. He was there 2 days. They went from Jerusalem into Samaria. Probably it took them a day probably to get to Samaria. Spent 2 days in Samaria, and then they walked on to Galilee, but probably another day or so. Second, we're told that the Galileans welcomed Jesus because of the miracles they'd seen Jesus perform in Jerusalem during the Passover feast. This shows kind of a definite time progression, not a long one. It was pretty shortened. And then third, we're told that Jesus returned to Cana, and he reminded us that Cana was where Jesus had turned the water into wine. That was where the wedding had been. And so now we're going to get to the healing of the official son, and that's John 4:46b to 54. Nancy, could you read that?
Okay. And at Capernaum, there was an official whose son was ill. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Galilee, from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The official said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will live." The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. As he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better. And they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him." The father knew that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." And he himself believed, and all his household. This was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee.
This is another miracle of Jesus that's not recorded in the other Gospels. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Bible scholars call them the synoptic Gospels. John is not part of that. His gospel is very different than theirs. And this is also one of the few miracles recorded by John that was not followed by a major discourse that Jesus gave. We're going to find out next time that we're going to read about the healing of the man at the pool of Bethesda, and he heals him. And after that, there's a big long discourse where Jesus is talking to the Jewish leaders, and we're going to see there's a lot of good information in that. So why did John include this miracle? I think the main reason for including this miracle is to show the power of faith. This official put his faith in Jesus to save his son, and then came to put his complete faith in Jesus after his son was saved. We'll talk more about that just some more. That's kind of an overview of the miracle. So,
Well, also this is one where Jesus was not there in person.
that's right. It is actually the first one where Jesus says your son will be healed or your servant will be healed, and it happens, and Jesus isn't even anywhere around.
Right.
So who was this official? The commentaries are unified in saying he's probably an official from Herod's court. Herod, wow. Herod was not a nice man.
None of the Herods were nice.
None of the Herods were nice. They were wicked people. Herod was the one that had John the Baptist at the time was in prison. Herod had put him in prison. But in the meantime, there were people that worked for Herod that came to believe in Jesus. But from a human perspective, the fact that he worked for Herod would have tainted him from the Jewish leader's position.
Truly, the enemy.
But Jesus doesn't care who you come from or what. He looks on people's hearts, something that we can't do. So the official, it says official had heard that Jesus was in Galilee, and he went in search of Jesus because his son was dying. His son was dying. And he heard about the healings Jesus had performed in Jerusalem and Judea during and after the Passover feast. And so, man, I get the impression he was on his last straw. He needed Jesus to heal him,
Or that was it.
or that was it. The son was going to die. It's clear to everybody that the son was going to die. So how did Jesus talk to the man? He challenged him. He challenged him. Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. So Jesus said, why are you asking me to do this, basically? I think he was challenging him. Do you really believe that I can do it? But you know what happened? The official persisted.
And that's not the only time Jesus did that.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, he did that with a woman about, well, we don't give bread to the dogs, but she goes, even the dogs lick up the crumbs. And he said, your faith, it's your faith.
Yeah. So we know the official had faith because of what he did.
Yeah, he went on his way.
Yeah. First of all, he searched for Jesus. He believed that Jesus could heal him, his son. And second, when he found Jesus and was challenged by Jesus, challenged him, he didn't give up. He didn't give up. He persisted. He believed that Jesus could heal his son.
Wouldn't leave until he did.
That's right.
I'm not leaving.
And then I think about what James said about faith. James said, without action, faith is useless. We can say we have faith all we want, but if we don't act on our faith, then it's worthless. James said that he would show us faith by what he did. Faith should be an action word, an action verb. Action, faith and action go together. There has to be some action, or the faith isn't real. But this man,
That's what happened there. Because when Jesus said, "Go, your son will live," he did the action.
Yeah.
He's okay,
Okay.
and went home.
that's right. He said, "Okay, I believe you," and he went home.
Mhm.
And he still had some doubts, though. He still had some doubts because when the people came to tell him that, hey, everything was okay, he asked them what time it was, and how is this, when did it happen? And when they told him the hour, he thought, that's exactly when Jesus told me that
It proved it.
it proved it,
To
and
him.
it was like confirmation
But
to him.
he walked out in faith before he had confirmation.
That's right. He walked out in faith before he had confirmation. I think that's cool. I think that's really cool. And what was the result of this miracle?
The saving of his whole family.
That's exactly it. That's exactly
Now,
it.
question, was this guy a Gentile or a Jew?
He was probably a Jew. He was probably a Jew. Well, it's just like Matthew worked for the Romans.
Yeah, I just, yeah.
Matthew was a tax collector. He worked for the Romans, and a lot of people worked for the Romans.
Yeah.
But here's a man who works for Herod. He's an official in Herod's court.
But he's probably not well liked by his buddies.
Yeah. But he came to put his trust in Jesus. How many people did he tell about Jesus and what he did? If it would have been me and Jesus healed my son who was dying, I would have told everybody about it. You got to go see this guy. He healed my son. And they would have all known that his son was dying because those things happen and you're telling people and you're looking all sad and everything. What a testimony he would have had. So I had to ask myself again, why did John include this miracle? Because it's not followed by a discourse or anything like that. And I think the answer is in what John himself says in John 20, verses 30 to 31. He says, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these, including this miracle, are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. John wanted people to know about Jesus and the life-giving thing about Jesus. Everything John wrote was so that we would put our trust in Jesus. And that should be our goal in talking to our friends and stuff. Like this gal that you're working with, Nancy, just what a beautiful thing. You're working with her because she needs to know about Jesus.
Yeah.
She needs to know about Jesus. Your son Daniel needs to know about Jesus personally. And many others that we know need to know about Jesus. And so that's really all I have to say about this passage.
We're just a few minutes.
We're a little, wasn't very long, but it's important. It's really important. And next week we'll begin studying John chapter 5, which is the healing of the man at the pool of Bethesda. There's a lot of people have made songs and all kinds of stuff. There's a song out there that the Gaithers sing. I think it's the Gaithers. So one of them sings, "Do you want to get well?" And it's all about the man.
Get well.
All about the man at Bethesda. And Jesus comes up to him and says, he's been laying there for a long time. And he says, "Do you really want to get well?" And good question to all of us. We're all, all people are basically sick with sin. And most, or maybe not most, but yeah, well, I'd say most don't want to get well. I love it. One of the women of the church gave a testimony, and she said we were singing a song about Christ breaking the chains and so forth, and she said, I just see a picture in my mind that of a person in a jail cell with the door open. The chains have been broken, but they don't want to leave the jail.
And the door is open.
The door's open, but they don't want to leave the jail. And that's a lot of people in this world. God can break the chain, but they don't want to they want to stay in the jail.
In the jail.
So questions or comments? Pretty short, but good, but short. All right.